of interest. And here, that's exactly the opposite of what Mueller did. Until we hear from Mueller, I am just flummoxed about that part of the letter.
Here's one set of factual matters that I think is fairly established, even with the thin gruel that we've gotten, David and Michael. I'll ask you both, starting with you, David, which is that the most, say, in the dossier, right, like the most sort of lurid ideas about collusion conspiracy are not true definitively, right? I mean, the idea that, like, Michael Cohen went to Prague and that there was this, like, extended and coordinated back and forth that was happening as they were running this operation hand in glove that comes through in some of the dossier, like, that just did not happen, we know pretty definitively at this point. Would you be comfortable saying that?
I think more or less. I think there was never a need for there to be that direct collusion or coordination, as I think there's the term that Mueller prefers.
Right.
Because, I mean, the Russians knew how to attack the DNC. They knew how to dump documents. They knew where the swing states were. The Internet Research Agency knew what issues got American voters riled up. They didn't need to sit down with Donald Trump and have Donald Trump tell them how to get into the DNC servers. I always thought the collusion or what was wrong here was that while this is happening, Trump keeps, and people connected to Trump, they keep meeting with the Russians and they keep signaling to the Russians they don't mind that the Russians might be intervening, and Trump is even out there after it becomes a public issue, after he's briefed on this by the U.S. intelligence community, and saying there's nothing going on.
Right.
If you're the Russians, it's like this is a green light.
Right.
And there are specifics like the Trump Tower meeting, the meeting between Manafort and a Ukrainian-Russian business colleague who may be connected to Russian intelligence that are particularly suspicious. Trump not telling anyone about the Trump Tower project in Moscow. All those things add up to, I think, the biggest scandal in American political history without there having to be any direct coordination.
Michael.
All right, that said, and I agree with everything David said, except that the dossier did set expectations, and it did shape what people were looking for, what they thought might have happened. It was endorsed on multiple times on this network, people saying it's more and more proving to be true, and it wasn't. And in fact, I think one of the reasons people were so surprised by the Mueller finding is that it undercuts almost everything that was in the dossier, which postulated a well-developed conspiracy between the Russians and the Trump campaign. That's what got people worked up initially, and we do have to acknowledge that, that which was alleged has not panned out.
The first appearance in the public domain, the document that first begins a sort of real coverage of this during the transition, which is that he was briefed on this document shortly thereafter BuzzFeed publishes, postulates in a series of memos both a well-coordinated attack by the Russians, but a back and forth between Trump world and the Russians, and that's the introduction to the notion of what happened. That then you're right, I think sets a framework.
And can I just make one more point, Chris? Because a lot of this was. We did see, some of us did see, just in the court filings that Mueller was making. Take the Roger Stone indictment. Everybody got all worked up about the fact that the Trump campaign was trying to use Stone to find out what WikiLeaks had. Well, go back to what the original allegation was in the dossier. It was that it was all a well-developed conspiracy, and the Trump campaign was in on it from the beginning. Which means they wouldn't have needed Roger Stone to find out what WikiLeaks had. If the allegations in the dossier were true, they already knew what they were. But those allegations were not true.